The topic for this panel discussion is lateral thinking, staying ahead of the curve. Items on the CXO checklist that can help them surf the wave. I would like to invite on the stage Mr. Shomiron Gupta, founder for the Netmonastery. A big round of applause for him.
Thank you.
I would also like to invite the panelist, Mr. Hariprasad Chede, National Bank of Fujairah, PJSC. He is CISO from National Bank of Fujairah, PJSC. A big round of applause. And Mr. Keyur Desai, CISO from Essar Ports and Shipping. And Mr. Subramanian Kumaraswamy, CISO, Visa Incorporation. Over to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the session. Thanks for attending and good afternoon.
Thanks for giving me the promotion. I am not a CSO yet.
Same for me as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Afternoon session. Thanks to my panelists to be here and help me host. Makes the job easier. So I'm the one who's going to ask the questions and point the finger at my friends here. By the way, we'll have an open format. Please feel free to raise your hand, disagree with us. If you agree with us, you can just listen to what's going on, right? All right. So the idea of this session is about figuring out what's going on, right? How are we thinking in our day jobs, and how are we basically trying to bring our capability of detection and being able to safeguard our infrastructure on a day-to-day basis, right? So we've got three absolute luminaries of the industry. What we want to know from them is how they've taken this industry standard, right? Everybody knows there's an industry standard. There's an industry standard for everything, right? So how do you take that industry standard and actually make it work? Because we know industry standards never work when you actually take it down to office, right? How do you actually make it work? How do you tweak the system and best practices from such organizations to figure out key things that were important in taking implementing major decisions. So we are pretty much a technical audience, right? So we will make that journey from 30,000 feet to 300 feet and backwards, up and down. So be with us. Hope we have a good time, right? So first set of questions. I'm sorry, I'm not a millennial, but I'll still use the phone. So first question, the first set of questions, I've got three questions for each of them. And before that, I'd like you to introduce yourselves so that you can, talk about yourselves, your passion, your areas of interest in cybersecurity. Yeah, 2 minutes each. You can do that.
Yep. Okay. My name is Hariprasad. Everybody knows Harry Potter. You can call me Hari. That's. I hope you remember my name now. My name is Hari. I work as a CISO from past 13 years from different national banks. We have multiple national banks in UAE. Okay. So my main passion is to change the culture of security in the organizations. I was there from the organizations where there is no security to the organization which is matured up to the CMM level 5 and how I have to fit over there. That is one. And my passion is what I learned from past 17 years, how I have to give it to the community. So I have started, everybody knows the moral science in your education, right? I don't know whether anybody heard about cyber moral science. I work with the psychologists and the kids to teach the cyber moral science for the kids from the age of 4 onwards to the 10. Okay, that is my one. And the second thing what I concentrate on is, that is what I learned from the sales team, is how to be an effective seller in the bank or in an institution in order to implement your security. If you're not a salesman, please don't join as a security CISO. That's my passion. And the third one is, I work for a forum called for the special needs kids. They don't know how to communicate. Okay, when I talk, you people at least nod. I know that when you people are listening. but they don't even understand. And I'm working with a couple of technical, especially with the Samsung and Apple, to understand how to use these technologies for effective communication with the people who doesn't even understand anything. This is the third thing. Thank you.
Keyur?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keyur Desai. I work for Essar. I play a couple of roles in my organization. One of my role is I work as a CIO for Essar Ports and Shipping Business Group, where I own the end-to-end IT lifecycle for these business groups. And my second role is I head the information security network and the oral unified communications part for Essar Group. That includes the Essar Steel business, Essar Ports, shipping, Essar power generation plants, Essar construction, corporate, agro, etc. So the list goes on. We also have a service arm that's the IT services arm that's called AGC Networks. So where my role is more about right from understanding the business risks, understanding the business workflows, business risk, evaluate the right solutions, and then evaluate the OEMs, work with various different partners, and kind of identify and implement the right solution and then maintain it. So we have a separate NOC, and we also have taken the managed SOC services from our internal this one IT services arm, that's AGC Networks. So that's what my role plays around. I just wanted to share my passion. I mean, my passion is a bit different from the technology. So in fact, I'm a typical music lover. So I play harmonica. So I'm a part of various different harmonica. So I'm a part of the All India Harmonica Players Group, where we meet once in a month, and even we have those harmonica clubs within Mumbai as well. So where we kind of meet once in a month, we do jamming, and I perform into those live programs in that way. So just an off track.
Brilliant. Super.
Hey, first, happy Holi.
Happy Holi to you too.
In the spirit of Holi, hopefully we can make this colorful discussion, right? So my name is Kumaraswamy. I lead the security architecture for Visa. How many of you have Visa cards in your packet? Either mobile or so we are a big payment player, and obviously security is the paramount for the entire company. We always say the number one priority in the company is security, right? So nothing else number one. Availability comes number two. So everything we do in the company starts with security first and foremost. I've been in the industry for the last 25 years and started as a developer. So I know the sins of developers, right? So I come to this side to make sure that we can now educate the developers so they can write good code, right? So making sure that we can have products with the least number of defects, right, going out. So it's, I don't know if you heard this term called shift left, right? How do you shift left to the beginning of the cycle? Starting with developers, starting with architects. So we start thinking about security very early in the life cycle, not something an afterthought, right? There's a saying that the cost of response is 100 times the cost of prevention, right? So it's very, very important to focus on prevention first before you think about, detection. They're all important part of defense in-depth strategy. But my passion is to make sure that we prevent things to start with. Prevent meaning built-in security versus bolt-on security, right? And my favorite quote is that head in the cloud, feet in the ground, right? Always look forward to the next, what's coming up, but don't lose sight of the basics. Make sure that you're very good baseline, good hygiene. The second quote I really enjoy, I think about is folks know Usain Bolt, right? Usain Bolt, so he has a very good saying. He says that I don't worry about things, right? I train every day, and and when it comes to the day I have to go perform, I'm performing. So it's very important for all of us in the room to think about what we do every day today. It's not about being reactive. So we train for the worst case scenario, right? We train to make sure that if there's a breach, we can respond quickly. And I remember Kevin Mandiant, who was the CEO of FireEye and Mandiant Corporation. He had a saying that the difference between A player and F player is not the A player is extremely secure, is that the A player can identify a breach in a very short duration, right? Versus the F players will take 6 months or 8 months before they understand that the company has been breached. So anyway, so those, so my, again, like I said, my fundamental approach to security is to understand how do we prevent things in the first place, and then build security around it.
All right, thank you so much. So, this, what we do this session is base this around the big surface areas of breach, right? So, the 4 we identify usually. If I am the user of the system and I myself is, I am the insider attack, right? And my intent is bad and I want to steal. Second is if my credentials are stolen, right? So somebody impersonates me and bunches deals into the system. Everybody thinks it's me. 3 is my endpoint is stolen, broken into, people throw deals through the endpoint. And 4 is the application I'm punching these deals into, right? And if that is broken. So we are going to try and attack as many of these attack surfaces, because the reason I've chosen this theme is that all 3 of them are from absolutely different spaces and are managing enormously large infrastructures, right? So the first one we're going to talk to Hari about is what is how do you manage to identify insider threat, right? And how do you deal with it from tactical to practical? So we'll go that whole distance from strategic to help us understand how you do it in your organization.
All right, I'll try to convince the people in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
you can shoot questions if you
disagree.
Raise your hand if you don't agree, please. Yeah, that's the protocol.
All right. First and foremost thing is there is no solution for the collusion in any organization. Okay. There is no collusion. There is no solution for a collusion. Just keep in mind. Okay. The second thing is, as I told in the beginning, a CISO has to be a good sales guy. That means he needs to understand his environment and his business very well. If he's not able to sell security to his people, the best of the best technology can't allow him to drive his program well. The second thing. Third thing is, you need to understand, I'll tell my experience, you need to understand what is the context of your organization, which part of this. A small example I will give you is, let's assume that if you are in a phase of implementation of the basic security controls in you, and if you are trying to be a part of a security and try to dictate IT people to implement those controls, it's never going to work. Because because everybody have an emotional quotient. Nobody wants to say that you are wrong, please implement this, right? If I pinpoint somebody, do they like it? Right? So you need to check it out in your organization, which part you are. So at that time, there is nothing wrong, though the best of the standards say that the security has to be independent from the IT and all those stuff. But if your organization is in the implementation phase of the basic security controls, there is nothing wrong in having a security team under IT. Okay? That is the first thing which I learned, and I was able to achieve the objectives very well and sell to the management. First thing. And the second thing is, when you are trying to do that one, you never boast about yourself. Let the business talk about you. That's why I'm saying that one, keep on saying that one. When you try to implement some solution, ensure that some business people go and talk to another business people. So you need to be ensure that one, who is that influencers in your organization that can influence your program across and to the senior management. You need to identify those people. Once you identify them, you need to get them under your shoes. Under your shoes means he has to feel that one, what is the pain that you're feeling it and what you're doing it. Unless you do that, you will not be able to execute that one. This is the governance part, what you call in the technical terms of standard parts, be it a governance or the organizational structure. If you follow these principles, you will be able to implement your information security program. Coming to the tactical things, in security, every day I heard about lot of new terminologies, right? There are so many terminologies, but I'm there in this industry from 2000 onwards in information security. It's been 18 years. The basics not changed. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, non-repudiation, and AAA. Right? Authentication, authorization, and auditing. Anything else? I don't think so. You tell me any weakness, I can map with this. Any weakness, you talk about any technology, anything, whatever the advanced technology you're talking about. Please ensure that these basics are right at wherever the program you are in. Okay? If you are able to do this, then you talk about the advanced technologies, about the detection and all those things, map it to this. That's the take on my side. Be it from the governance perspective, I told you, from the technology perspective, ensure that these basics are taken care. Thank you.
Insider threat, yeah. You want
No, I just wanted to, respectfully disagree on one thing, right? Collusion. So we talked about, the Snowden problem, right? Where you had excess privilege. So obviously, there are certain things can be solved by technology, certain things cannot. But having said that, right, you do want to make sure there is a clear, separation between roles, right? Especially if privilege uses access control. So I just want to kind of understand from your perspective, when you say collusion, are you referring to collusion, on the business side, or you're...
Okay, so when I talk about the collusion, like between the technology part, people, if the collusion happens, the risk is much lower. If you're talking about the business, the best of the technology you might implement, let's assume that you have an authorizer who is having in a SWIFT deal. Let's take about many of the people know the SWIFT deal.
Suddenly
okay.
SWIFT is coming.
Okay, let's take the SWIFT deals. If there is a 3-level or to 4-level of authorizations, we can have it, right? The ultimate person will be having let's assume that he's having an authorization of $100 million. Just a collusion between layer 2 to layer 4 is possible? It is definitely possible. And we are already given an authorization parameter for the level 4 guys, $100 million. It depends upon out of $100 million, how much percentage he gets, these layers, that's it. You put a technology of, let's assume that you put a machine learning technology and whatever the technology you try to put it, you try to take out the fraud, saying that it is going to the same destination and all those things. But my authorizer is $100 million is one. And then again, once the money moves out, he might get caught, but money never get back. You take about any of the incidents now.
Follow-up question, just you can add to this one, right? Again, collusion, how do you identify that, one thing that Subra mentioned was being able to detect it, so you're going to get breached, right? How will you detect it fast, right? What are those controls that you need to put in place to identify a breach quickly so that you can respond and, limit collateral damage, right?
One thing I can say I'm sure that Visa is having speaks about the volumes. This is where even still I yet to get a solution. What I was thinking is, before a collision, there should be a pattern. The pattern may not be the transactions within your organization. The pattern can be outside. Maybe a social network, his family is trying to move out from these things. There should be some pattern there. If there is a pattern, external and internal map, we should be able to come out with some correlation and try to identify earlier. That is what I can view it. I mean, if any other panelists can add more value to it.
If I can add, right? So we collect over 8 billion events a day, right? We don't have a problem with data collection. We collect data from every single aspect, from your laptop, from your IDS, IPS, firewall, you name it, right? We are collecting data out of the wazoo. So the problem is the signal to noise ratio, right? How do you able to find the needle in the needle stack?
Yeah.
So we've been, for the last couple of years, we've been applying quite a bit of machine learning. Machine learning, as you know, there's a lot of buzzword, artificial intelligence, other buzzword, right? So there is definitely a lot of hype around machine learning. But having said that, right, you have to start experimenting, right? You have to understand, what Hari was saying is that, what is a normal pattern, right? So just for folks, right, in the room, you probably understand that most of the use cases in cybersecurity is unsupervised learning, right? That means like every data that you collect has no label. You don't know what is good, what is bad, right?
Correct.
like spam, right? You know, spam, the spam filters are very
validated with
they're
users.
trained, right? They're trained to understand what looks like a normal email versus a spam. Same issue, right? We collect 8 billion events a day, but we don't know what those events are, right? So one of the things we've been doing is we have what we're calling as closed loop effect, where as data is coming in, we apply the models, machine learning, we distill down like a funnel, right? We distill down to actionable, maybe like 30 or 40 events a day. And from there, we validate. So there are human beings come in, right? The security analysts come in. They look at the events. They understand, hey, this looks like that laptop is compromised. There's a malware, right? And then we take that data and then we start labeling automatically every single event that comes along, right? Then it becomes supervised learning. So then you have an intelligent model that can catch, right? And without going to the details, we have caught many instances because we looked at some of the patterns and say, hey, this looks like a data exfil, right? And we're able to identify. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect, but there are ways to do it using more of what we call deterministic rules. But the problem with deterministic, there are two, right? The two aspects. One is deterministic, which is very declarative, versus predictive, right? Can you predict something that is happening? So a lot of the rules-based technology, like firewall is rules-based, right? You know that it's allow or deny, right? Nothing else. But in machine learning, it's fuzzy. So you have to start continuously learn, continuously train the models and be able to say, does this data that is moving from this machine to other machine looks like a normal data? Is it a SQL Server administrator doing a dump? Or is it insider taking a dump and walking out?
Absolutely. And I want to take this to Keyur and ask him, what do you do with endpoints, right? I mean, you have, so Keyur has multiple organizations that he represents and a large number of endpoints that are uncontrolled, right? So, I mean, how do you work with endpoints and make sure, that sanity prevails at the end of the day?
Yeah, so before I quickly respond to that, I mean, I just like to add one more to the last point, Subra, was this is based on the experience that we had as a part of our SOC journey. Was while nothing comes, I mean, like you all know, nothing comes, the typical use cases as the out-of-the-box use cases, right? So for each and every business verticals, we actually sat with our business teams to ensure that what are those deviations as the business team should proclaim as. So business teams say if we are performing so and so activity, so let's say the accounts team, the finance team, the production team. So each team have their own versions of the deviations. Now these deviations, then we go back and map it with our SOC team, saying that if anything deviates from this, we should get an alert in that way.
You have a baseline.
Absolutely. So that actually helped us a lot. I mean, still it's a journey, as I said. I mean, it's still we have kind of a long way to go. And
I think this is very relevant, right? I mean, baselining, outlier detection is extremely important for identifying insider threats, right? Yeah. So some things that, you did $1 million transaction last 3 months, no. And you're doing $1 million transaction right now. It's a clear outlier and that needs more validation. Yeah? Question? Sure. Yeah, sure. Be loud, that's it.
Yeah. I'm actually a lawyer working in technology, so my perspective might be a little different. But from the way I look at incident response, I think if once you identify an incident, then the first place you go to look for further information is the logs, right?
Correct.
So just coming to the whole insider threat pattern, my question is more about employee privacy. So as CISOs who collect a lot of data, clearly, as you mentioned, is that something that you even think about while doing this? Is employee privacy still a consideration, or?
Yeah, we'll just keep that quick because that's going to pull us in some other direction.
Or is it reasonable to say that employees should not have any expectation of privacy while they're at work? Is that something you think about?
I'll take that one. I deal with logs every day. I have a mic. Yeah, so I think employee privacy, if you're using the office internet for Facebook, yeah, you're going to be watched, unfortunately. So because there are higher priorities in a corporate environment and the corporate has to deal with far larger boxes of Pandora, right? So unfortunately, yes, you will have a privilege.
So I think certainly, just to add, right, it's also country specific, right? European countries are much more sensitive, right? So there's certain things. So we do have to take that into consideration in terms of what you can capture data. So yeah, certainly, but but by and large, when you sign a deal, when you sign the contract with the company, you're giving up the rights.
Sure, sure, yeah.
Your solution.
Kishan, you have a question, yeah, sure.
Everybody was talking about the baseline. Once you do the baseline, if the number of false positives is too high. So where you will get the people to analyze that. And on top of that, there are multiple technologies available. How you integrate between these two? Because they write their logs in their own format. So
Correct.
you talked about Swift. There are the 1% to the 4%. Now how you will differentiate between them?
Okay.
Quickly, yeah, you're going on.
All right. See, that is where, again, we need to ensure that one, okay, baseline as per our organization requirement. Okay, I might be having what technology, based on my technology, what services will work or not. Based on that, we need to customize that. There is no single silver bullet to solve all the solutions. We need to ensure that what is customized for it. That much I can say about straightforward.
Outlier detection plus a little bit of machine learning, you'll have a classifier system that will learn on its own. Your number of false positives will reduce for your organization over time.
That's the journey.
Yeah.
Of course, all of us have to walk our journey in our own organization. I can't get a model that fits me to work for any other organization. It has to relearn.
So 90% of the effort goes into data engineering, right? The 10% is the, because you have to make sure that garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're not able to collect that data, normalize it, and ingest the data, whether you're using Hadoop or Elasticsearch or Splunk, right? It's very important to make sure that the data that you're capturing the right attributes, because in machine learning, there's something called feature extraction. So you have to extract the features like IP address or port or a size of the packet, right? All those are very important eventually to understand what a baseline is.
Okay, super. So next question to Keyur again. Endpoint compromise. You want to just do the tactical part or sorry, the practical part? How do you deal with that in a largest organization?
Like, so I'm sure we'll all agree we'll have n number of agents sitting across the endpoints. Nowadays, we have one agent doing the legacy, the endpoint security, one agent monitoring the assets, one agent sitting and kind of again doing the ML and AI part now, all that. Again the DLP part, yes. So now while we have n number of agents, I mean while this story goes on, what we kind of have gone ahead in our organizations. So as I said, I mean while we have a typical diversified type of business where we have a steel manufacturing plant in the remote part of the country, where sometimes food is hard to find. And even by 4 o'clock in the evening, you have to kind of you to kind of vacate the place because of the X number of reasons. Now, staying in those areas or rather working in those areas, those endpoints are still a part of the network, right? The endpoints are still part of the network. So what we're doing is we've kind of gone ahead with a solution. I'll not name the solution. We just started rolling out. It's almost 50. We kind of halfway in the journey. Now that solution is simple. Again, it's an endpoint which sits on the top of the endpoint security. I mean, it kind of complements the endpoint security, and it's a typical signature-less solution where it works. It actually scrambles the. So while all our application, web browser, OS, they actually work in the memory space. So this particular application kind of scrambles the process part, the memory process part for each and every unique activity. Now let's say if there's an malicious attack happening on that particular machine, so this agent also kind of keeps a dummy, keeps the original memory allocation structure as a part of intact, and actually it kind of scrambles it and notifies the application saying that the new memory allocation is different. Now let's say if attack happens, the attacker still will kind of still get confused saying that which is the right memory allocation part, and as soon as it hits the original or the dummy memory allocation part, it gets trapped. So now as a part of that solution, we could now roll it out to all our remote locations, all our plant locations where we have those power generation plants which are in remote part of the different states within India. We are also now targeting all our remote locations which are kind of outside India, and so just to name few which are kind of connected through broadband, which are connected to the IPsec tunnels. So all those endpoints are now kind of connected, and now as a part of our next story, and we have kind of put this as one of the criteria, saying that if this endpoint is not there in the machine for whatever 50% we rolled out, that machine will be quarantined in that way. So, there are a number of ways. We actually found this way kind of, and just to mention, so we'll be the first organization within India who will be kind of implementing this particular solution. So maybe in another month or maybe in another couple of months, it will be out in public media.
Super. Okay, so how many of you are interested in analytics in cybersecurity? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, cool. So next question to you, Subra. So you have seen, you see a mountain of data every day. How do you deal with, how do you use analytics? Just 2 minutes on.
Sure, yeah.
The process.
There's a saying that what you don't measure, you can manage, right?
And you can't measure and you can't improve.
Yeah, and the same thing goes with security. We have to understand the line of sight. So from analytics standpoint, we are very, very pedantic when it comes to data. We measure everything. For example, patching, right? At any given time, any user, application owner within Visa can log into a portal and get a snapshot of what systems are patched, what time, right? So our goal is 100% compliance, right? 100% continuous patching. Unfortunately, it's a lot of pain, a lot of tax on the operations, on the business side, right? But so, the reason why we do this is we did a research and we found the 3 ways companies get compromised, right? Number 1, malware on laptop, right? Keyur was saying, why endpoint security matters. So if you're constantly getting phished, we see all sorts of phishing attacks, right? And the spear phishing, malware is getting dropped, through macros, what have you, right? Number 2, insider threat, right? We talked about that, right? Insider threat is, that's another reason why, you see either data exfiltration or, compromises happening through backdoors. Number 3 is really, like I said, patching. Vulnerability management is a key part of the strategy that every company should think about. So we have to collect, so going back to the question is that, so we need to understand what is the posture for the endpoint. So at any given time, I should know what controls are running on the laptop. And we know that a lot of the developers, they have admin privilege, right? They need to do some testing on their, Xcode or Visual Studio or Eclipse, right? They're constantly running against Apache and Nginx and all that. At the same point, right, when we know that some folks have admin privilege, we also need to understand what controls are, in place. So if they try to disable a control, we should be able to go back and say the system is, violating a policy and we'll quarantine it, right? So we have, as we collect data, we always ask why we need to collect the data, right? Unless you have to start with the question first, why is this data important for you to take an action? Whether it is for, putting a rule in a firewall or putting a rule on IDS, or for, understanding the security control efficacy, right? So we start with that first, what are the basics that we need to think about? For example, DDoS, right? So, we see constant attacks in DDoS, and we understand, we like to know what are the targets, what are the services that are getting targeted? And we collect data through Akamai as example, and we collect through other defenses that we have internally. So this provides the feedback into the application architecture, right? I can actually build in now rate limiting. If I know that my APIs are the target for the hackers because there's something valuable there, right? Because we expose quite a bit of APIs, and these are payment APIs, and very easy to commit fraud, right? For example,
can your architecture also change dynamically based on what kind of attacks you're seeing?
Well, we do the ideal scenario, right? Where you want very dynamic way of introducing controls, sure. Right? But today, if you know, almost 80% of traffic on the internet or within the enterprise is encrypted, right? You have TLS. So you need to make sure that, be able to get visibility into the traffic to understand what is going on, yeah. Right? So what we are saying is that, can we introduce some controls on the fly? If I see an attack coming in, can I route the traffic?
Can you do out-of-band response on that or not?
Or route the traffic to, let's say there is IDS, IPS, WAF, right? But I know that this particular attack is relevant to application attack. So I can actually route the traffic through an application control like a WAF versus subjecting every single traffic to the same controls, right? So basically, currently what we have is a very static model, one size fits all. Where we want to go into is more dynamic controls, where I can introduce controls on the fly, right? That's the vision, so that we can actually improve the user experience first, and also make sure that we only apply the right controls for the right threat level.
Can I add
Sure.
this one?
Sure.
Traditionally, what we try to do is, if at all any attack happens, first thing what we try to do, I mean, any answers? If any attack you've observed in your organization, what is the first thing we try to do?
Yeah, pull the wire.
Unplug the network. Okay, unplug the network and all the stuff.
Yeah, you need people with fast legs then.
Just imagine how many of us are actually keeping this unplug of the network in mind when you're designing an architecture. Okay, so did we take the business into consideration? Is it okay for them to shut down the service when we unplug that particular thing when an incident happens? I'll take an example, because the traditional architecture is, if it is my if my primary is not there, I'll shut down the primary and make it high available one and make it available to the customer. And if the secondary is not available, make the DR available and make it out. So the concept need to be changed. That's what we are doing, some research within the organization, like a submarine principle. If the submarine one gate is closed, you close the second gate so that at least your crown jewels are protected. So are we trying to look into that particular angle? Are we educating our business guys, saying that one, what is the critical services that we need try to protect, like a fail-safe method?
You want to talk a little bit about how do you build your incident response plan and then maintain it?
Okay.
So everybody who's dealt with any kind of incident response plans know that, yeah, we build it once in our lifetime and then it remains there for the...
So
it's a piece in the showcase, right?
To be frank, it is the toughest question, to be frank, because maintaining an incident response is actually I will just map it to the previous thing. How you ensure that your team is active. I went and interviewed a couple of the SOC analysts and tell them that, Hari, I have to sit for 8 hours. I'm doing the same boring job. How many of you feel it? Any SOC analyst feel that one? I have to analyze of the multiple customers and feeling the same point. So what is that eager to ensure that when these SOC analysts are active, what is that you're giving to them? Okay, not always monetary is not the only thing. How you make them active? What is that? Okay, that is one of the key things.
Can you incentivize that process?
Incentivize, again, depends upon the organization, depends upon the role of a CISO, up to what level he has. If the CISO doesn't have an opportunity to take it for himself, I don't know what is capable to do it for others. I think that is where we need to revolutionize this particular thing. It's if you see this one, the data scientists are the very highly paid. If you see the Gartner's Magic Quadrant or something, statistics, their average salaries more than $250,000 per year, and the data scientist. Do you know what is the information security analyst package? It starts from $60,000. Okay, so that's the difference. So that is where we need to check it out. What is the added value we're giving to the business? And actually the data analyst is doing the same thing what you're doing, to be frank. He is just giving a business value to the customers. If we are able to, as information security people, if we are able to show that business value, then we can make it. Okay, coming back to my things, how you make it active is, it is a continuous process. There is nothing called a single process you set and sleep over it. You need to continuously evaluate, and then everybody knows that when the technology is changing every 3 months now, every quarter, right? Every quarter you have to change. So is your business is into that kind of change of technology? Or your business is not adapting that kind of change in the technology? That is the first thing we need to keep in mind. If you are into the financial institution, and if you are majorly into the retail banking, because I'm in from financial institution telling, if you are not adopting the technology, you are not into the retail banking business within the next 5 years, straightforward. So you need to innovate yourself. And I'm seeing a trend where the information security people are becoming an innovation team. Because the analytic capability of all of us is much more than actually business people. Okay, so that is where we need to try to understand the business. Our analysts not only, please don't get into only technology. Wherever in industry you are there, try to understand the business. When you're looking into from a fraud or a security perspective, try to look from a business value perspective and give that to the management. That's where we can win it.
Super. Okay, so question to Keyur again. Now I'm going to move to threat intelligence. Anybody, in the room working with threat intel? Nobody. Oh, there is. Oh, fantastic. Slowly. Are you working with, or are you?
Yeah, all of it.
All of it. You have some specific questions. I'm going to frame my question.
No,
you can improve it. So, how do you identify, right? You've got so many threat intel vendors saying, hey, I'll give you some CTI, I'm going to give you some feed. How do you choose one vendor, number one? How do you, number two is, Subra, you can follow up with this one. How do you make sure that you're actually gaining value from that particular vendor on a continuous basis, right? There are possibilities of somebody hitting a home run in the first 3 months, but based on that, are you going to be able to keep that value quotient up for the next year or not, is my question. So, quickly.
So first of all, like you all know, threat intelligence. I mean, for any and every organization, it's an expensive affair. That's one. So before we start even evaluating the requirement, the need for the threat intel, we need to really understand that before we kind of start evaluating, we need to do some of our homework, saying that do we have the right skill set to kind of ensure that once we have the feeds coming in, are we kind of geared up to ensure that we kind of make the meaningful, make the most out of it. That's one. Second is, are we aware about our business requirements? As you rightly said, Shomiron is one. We need to kind of ensure that all the business workflows, all the business process, and all the business data, which are the most critical for the business, should be aware. That's point number two. And point number three is, once we start kind of working with the threat intel partners or the service providers, there are, as you rightly said, there's a whole list of SPs, and in that case, we need to map it with so there's no one thumb rule for that. I mean, we need to kind of map it based on our requirements. That's one. So when I say our requirement is, we need to ensure that once we have the feeds coming in, what will be the intensity? I mean, will we be getting the alerts on a real-time basis, or will we getting the alerts or the reports maybe once in a day, once in a week, maybe? And also the support from the service provider in case of those crisis situation, maybe the 24/7 support to their T3 engineers in the times of crisis. Now these are some fundamental pointers which, before even we start thinking about, we'll need to ensure that we take care of all these factors, and then we kind of start our discussion with the partners.
Sure. Subra, you want to
Yeah,
add?
I mean, we do collect.
Try and go practical.
Yeah, so we have a very sophisticated platform called Threat Intel Fusion Platform, TIFP.
Wow.
Right? We built it over the last 3 years, right? We're version 3 right now. So a lot of that is really how do we're getting intel from government, from private sources, right? And a lot of the indicator of compromise, IOCs, as they come in. So we take those and we normalize it, right? Because a lot of them are duplicates. So we don't want to be, creating over and over the same IOCs. So we actually, pull that, we normalize it, and then we have an orchestration platform, right? The orchestration platform can actually push all those signatures to, let's say, to the WAF, as an example, right? You see a SQL injection attack coming in for a particular application. So we look at that, we normalize it, and then say this has to be eventually, pushed into the runtime systems. So it's really a discipline. You need to create a discipline around how do you want to ingest and be able to baseline what is relevant to you. And there are quite a bit of IOCs that are relevant to endpoint compromises. So there, again, we are constantly, we are exploring, malwares in the labs, understanding, what those are.
Do you have outbound relationships as well? So where you're seeing malware manifest in your environment and you're able to share that?
We share it with banks. We do, right?
You have a CUG of
I'm sorry?
closed user group of some sorts?
Yeah, so we do it in a very controlled way, right? So we have certain customers, big customers who at banks, right? We share intel with them, and vice versa, right? We get intel from them. So certainly, there is value when you have a crowdsourcing where you can get if somebody else in the same financial vertical is seeing the same issue, it's better to share them and be able to get more value out of it. So that's something that we are benefiting a lot, right? But I think before I would say, have a threat intel strategy, understand how you're going to consume it, understand how you're going to act on it, right? And then you can say, are you going to put effort behind it?
And also how will you measure it over time?
Exactly, right? So the efficacy of, the threat intel will only, so I don't believe in ROI for security, right?
Sure.
So we don't ask that question as, is an ROI, because right there, you're flawed, right? Because for us, it only takes one breach, right? So we do evaluate different sources, and then we also understand, if we have prevented certain things, can we measure against that, right? So we had, and some of it is doing analytical exercise, looking back, and every time, the time we do that is when you come for annual renewal, right? If say, hey, do we need to spend $500,000 on this vendor? Let's go up and see, what value got, right?
Correct.
So
I not talk to insurance, right? That's the new answer we have.
Can I add my experience to that one? Threat intelligence, it all started in my experience, is when the Saudi Aramco incident happened, where 65,000 servers are wiped off overnight. Just imagine what happens to us, what we do. That is what my CEO has asked me a question, what I have to do. So I told that, I don't know what is actually happening there, to be frank. Wiping off is okay, but actually how it happened. So that's where, we categorize this into the two. One is, it has to be contextual based. It has to be which industry you are in, which geographical location you are in. Maybe I'm from Middle East. The threat intelligence that is happening in India may not be valuable to me that is happening in Middle East, and vice versa, the same thing. That we need to be very careful, depend upon where our organization or their context is very important. And the third thing is your peer relationship. That means I'm a CISO of a bank. Do I have a peer contacts with the other CISOs of the banks? That is the best thing that has saved me multiple times. You need to ensure that you have a contact with other peers. They're the two things. If you want an official threat intelligence from them, trust me, the regulators, the diplomacy and all those things never allow you to get what you want. And there is another relationship, depends upon how you want a relationship, whether they will be able to, maybe a WhatsApp relationship, you get it. So be practical. To be frank, this is my practical experience, I'm telling it. Have both kind of relationship. One is to show to the regulators that we have a threat intelligence. One, to practically come out from your situation. Okay? I'm contacting these people, many people, you have a relationship with all the subject matter experts across the globe, whether you deal with them or not deal with them. That helps you when real incident happens. That is what the threat intelligence we are talking about. Thanks to the WhatsApp, I still say it, I'm sure that thanks to the WhatsApp group, that will help us. So this is the third one, threat intelligence. And the fourth one is very simple. Everybody can implement their own institution, is reward the people who report maximum phishing mails in your organization. If you see the 90% of the attacks that happen in your organization or any of the attack you've seen in the globally started with a phishing attempt. Okay? Try to reward your employees, whoever actually report phishing to that one, and collect those IPs, and that will give a real threat intelligence for you guys.
All right, super. So looks like we have run out of time. We have just time for a couple of questions. Any questions for our panelists? Yeah, sure. Can we get the mic there? Yeah.
Anoop here. The moderator actually asked this question. right? I mean, in the cyber analytics horizontal, yeah, what are the different verticals it is going to touch in the cyber arena? We talked about threat intelligence. We talked about SOC. Is there any other verticals where analytics can play a role in cyber?
Anup, is this for specific somebody on the
Yes,
panel?
Subra.
Yeah, okay, Subra, sure.
So a good question, man. So one of the things we are doing is we are not constraining in fact, threat intel used to be very confidential, sent to only 10 people in the company, right? We said, why? I mean, we want everybody to understand what the threats are. So we opened it up, right? So we said, we have a mailing list. Anybody who wants to sign for threat intel, sign up, right? We have DLP if someone's trying to forward those and stuff like that, right? So we've since then, right, we have seen other areas in the company, especially on the business side, the application owners who run the apps, they need to understand, how the threat intel can be monetized for them. So we are collecting, so going back to, the lanes, right? So if you look at lanes, we have the SOC lane, which is, feet on the ground, completely looking at data, every day. We also have the application side. So we're looking at collecting data for SSDLC, which applications are seeing the same vulnerability over and over again, right? Log is another lane. So we do, that's a very good point. So logging is something that we have to do at every layer, network layer, app layer, at the middleware layer, right? So that is very, very helpful. So ultimately, it's about correlation and able to connect the dots. So, the more you can connect the dots and understand, is this an attack happening specific to an application, or is it something that's happening horizontal, right? It's attacking every single operating system in that network, right? So, yes, the AppSec area itself can benefit a lot when you start mining data and be able to provide more insights as to, what kind of attacks we're seeing on those apps.
Any other question? Yeah.
I can take offline too.
Can you pass the mic?
Yeah, hi, this is Thomas here. I'm a pen tester. So I have a quick question on what he said about 65,000 servers getting wiped out and about compliance and patching. So my question is very simple. I mean, for example, there is a vulnerability that comes out. For example, Meltdown or Spectre or a Flash vulnerability. And maybe Google or Microsoft or whichever the vendor is, it takes time to get out a patch out of this. So that is a time when an attacker would definitely know, what has to be hacked or where the attack is performed. So if that time a particular thing is compromised or a network architecture is compromised, how is it that you deal into it? I mean, that's a question. Because that is where the IDS or the IPS or the other things would not have the signature or the pattern that is learned.
Yeah. Isn't the patch out before the information about the vulnerability?
No, not always.
Not always.
Okay.
You're talking about
Perfect world. In a perfect world, yes.
Non-responsible disclosure world, yes.
Can I answer for that one?
Yeah.
All right. So it might be happen for one particular technology, right? So we all think about the layered defense that we're talking about. We are talking, let's assume that whatever the vulnerability you're talking about, it impacted the Intel chips in the Windows environment, let's say. But you have the layered technology controls that you implemented. Never depend on a single technology. And then always, that's where I was talking about a principle called fail-safe. If really that kind of thing happen, can I switch off all these things and put only my critical services where my core services are running? That is where we need to worry about. It's because we can't keep 100% and always the hackers or the other part of the world is much collaborative than us and they always overcome. We need to have a layered defense strategy with us.
All right, last question. Yeah, you want to add something?
No, want to say, I mean, if you're talking about 0 day, right? 0 day, then we're pretty much host, right? I mean, we don't know what 0 day is, right? But what we can do is, if you see, this is where detection technologies come into picture, right? The data we're collecting, if I see a pattern that doesn't happen before, then I can start investigating, right? Understand what is the reason, what is the root cause for this kind of pattern. That may lead into the actual way the system got compromised, right? So that's where, the A players come into play, right? Where how fast can you actually find out that this particular anomalies happened and it has to be investigated, and that leads to the zero-day compromise or other ways. So detection technology has a big role to play, but you also had to have the operational discipline to look at data, understand, is this something a baseline behavior or is it something an outlier anomaly?
All right, last question. Anybody? Follow up. Okay, we give you a chance. Okay, that one offline, sorry.
Everyone talked about pretty much the typical security challenges within an organization. I think you brought in a very interesting topic, that is the outlier aspect. I mean, if you ask me sincerely, they are the outliers that many organizations should be really worried about. Not the script kiddies, or probably a pen testing exercise, or probably a Metasploit module that's been run and trying to breach some data. So what would be the strategy when you're actually trying to really solve this problem of 1% of the elite hackers? So how does your organization's thought processes? I'm not actually looking for what your strategy is, but what the thought processes.
Okay, so
Who do you want to ask?
So
anyone who can take.
Let me start, right? So again, without giving too much data, right? So one thing we do is we have the red team, blue team concept, right, in the company. And the red team, so we do employ, when we have, when we have a new model, we let the red team attack, right? We understand, are we seeing other ways that this can be compromised? And that provides signals to say, hey, these are the ways that, and I'll give you one example.
Is that the original research, or probably using the existing exploits?
Well, if you already know the exploits, right, it's all signature based, right?
That's what my question is. If you are actually doing a red team exercise using a known exploits, what's the point? The point is you anyway going to detect it.
So I think the question is more about if you're going to identify outliers, right? How are you going to do that without having equal data, right? I mean, equal data from the outside.
So
you don't have current knowledge, right? But I think the answer is that you study your past and build your baseline based on that, and then identify outliers to that. That might be a false positive. Learn from that, feed forward. Learn from that, feed forward. Eventually, you build a model which has strong enough classifiers, which be able to give you fairly accurate information.
So the reason, how we did, in my experience, in the correlation of the this one is, we did the correlation based upon the identity based. We know exactly each user, what kind of things they will be able to communicate, what they are trying to do on a daily pattern. Okay, and if there is any abnormal thing happening using that particular user, okay, that is an outlier for us. I will be knowing, let's assume that Hari is accessing a Swift server daily between 10 to 12, and suddenly he is accessing in some other time. Okay, this is an outlier, and Hari accessing as admin. So definitely identity based, because every event we map it to the identities, and from there we are trying to do the outliers. Of course, still, even if you try to do up to that level, what you're talking from the 0-day perspective, okay, none of these things will give it. Only the traffic will move. That is the only outlier as of now I'm coming to. If there is any solutions also, please do let me know.
Crowdsource these solutions.
Sorry? The issue with that kind of a strategy is that if you're already compromised, you're actually
benchmarking that already.
And saying, this is my baseline.
Okay, you are right. You are absolutely right. When I try to do that one, I will ensure that one, what is the status of my organization based upon the known vulnerabilities at that point of time. I agree with that particular time. If somebody is targeting me from past 10 years and wanted to ignite after 5 years, I can't help. I totally agree. I can do from the based upon the expertise what the organization has, or from the external people. I do the current state assessment. From that time only, I will be able to do it. But from that time, if there is a 0-day which is not known, if suddenly wanted to target me, then I will look into my business. I might be so much concentrated, somebody want to invest 10 years on me. That is the question mark I will be having on my own, to be frank.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to my panelists, Hari. Thank you, Keyur. Thank you, Subra. Thank you so much.